Okay, let's get started. It's 7 o'clock, and I think we might have a quorum here. So let's call the meeting to order and have a roll call.
Cynthia Hoyle.
Here.
Annie Adams.
Here.
Kara Dudek.
Here.
Audrey Ishii.
Here.
Susan Jones.
Here.
Jeff Marino.
Here.
Craig Schonkweiler.
Here.
Lily Wilcock.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great. Next item is approval of the agenda. Does anyone have anything they want to add?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to add the meeting dates for 2017 to the agenda.
And we can act on that tonight? Okay.
Yeah, because we have it posted as, what, the third Tuesday of the month or something like that. So anyway, but these are the official dates.
Okay. Okay.
We just have one change that first, the January 17th,
Oh, okay.
because it's after a holiday.
Oh.
The city council will meet here on Tuesdays.
Ah, okay. All right.
It's just a location change.
Okay. All right. So do we have a motion? So you've motioned to approve with amendment?
To add the. Yes.
Is that what we need? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Approval of minutes from previous meeting. We have the notes from November 15th. I have some changes. Does anyone else have any? Okay. On page 5, the last paragraph. The second sentence, city is capitalized. It shouldn't be capitalized because I'm not talking about the city of Urbana as the city itself, but the city as a community. I'm not asking the city to develop a culture of clearing sidewalks, but basically the people who live here. And then I had just some wordsmithing for the second part of that sentence too, so it would read, and I can give this to Cynthia Hoyle, hoped that the city would have a culture of clearing sidewalks and one of providing assistance in priority areas and to individuals in need. And then deleting the second sentence because I'm quite sure I said something more like, ultimately we need a snow removal ordinance, but even if we have a snow removal ordinance, we would still need an encouragement program. So the encouragement program is needed regardless of whether or not there is a snow removal ordinance that impacts the entire city. So those were the changes I had, and if you'll pass that down, it might be easier for her to make those changes. All right. Anything else? I hear a motion to approve. Can we approve as amended? All right.
I move to approve as amended.
Second?
I second.
Annie seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right. Public input. We appear to have public in the hallway, but not inside. So we'll go on to the next one. Is there any unfinished business? Okay. Then we will go to new business. And we have an update on the pedestrian master plan from Brad Bennett is our first item.
Thank you for letting me come in and talk to you this evening. I had presented to you originally back at the October BPAC meeting what the proposed scope of services was for the pedestrian master plan, and you had graciously provided some comments and questions, which I then took to the Regional Planning Commission, who's the one that would be doing the master plan study, and discussed all those items with them. And what I've got here tonight is hopefully the responses you were looking for to the questions and concerns that you had. So starting out, one of the first ones I had down was executive summary, specifically looking for an executive summary to be included as part of the master plan report. I did talk with Regional Planning Commission. They do or a scope of services would include that master plan report. The second item I had was a walking preference survey, and the specific item on that one was allowing people to submit photos of places that they like to walk and not walk. And the Regional Planning Commission said they would allow that to be submitted through the web page. They thought that was probably the most effective way of capturing those. They did point out they tried something similar on the bike master plan, but they didn't get a whole lot of photographs submitted. But we would continue to try that here with the pedestrian master plan as well.
It's harder to take pictures on your bicycle.
Yeah, definitely challenging of the balance, yes. The third item I had was community meetings and walking preferences survey. 2 public meetings were included in the scope of services. There was a question about whether we could add additional opportunities, like going to the farmers market to collect survey data and public opinion, for the master plan. I did talk to them, and they said we could add additional events to the 2 public meetings that were included in the initial scope of services. It would be about $1,200 an event. So we had a budget about $45,000 for the master plan, so we could add a couple of additional meetings, 1 or 2. I think we could do within the budget of the master plan if that's desired. There was a question about providing some policy recommendations regarding development to make that more pedestrian friendly. The Regional Planning Commission said they would include some general recommendations as part of the master plan, but they wanted to point out it would be up to city staff to draft the specific language and incorporate that and implement that into the subdivision and land development ordinance. So they can provide some general kind of framework, but the specific wording and getting that into the document and then getting that out to developers would be up to city staff. Existing plan review was the next item that I had. We wanted to verify that the Greenway and Trail Plan, the Urbana Park District Trail Plan, Climate Action Plan, the city's sustainability plan, Urbana Bike Master Plan would all be reviewed and included as part of the pedestrian master plan. I did confirm that all those studies will be reviewed and incorporated into the pedestrian master plan. One of the recommendations was to document the benefits of the master plan in order to garner public support. The Regional Planning Commission said it was included in the scope of services to do that. So they'll, provide and document specific benefits, for making us a more walkable community. Pedestrian connections, one of the recommendations was to provide or identify areas with poor or missing pedestrian connections. That will be included in the scope of services. Once again, as far as addressing those, that would be something that city staff would have to do as far as, what the specific treatment or correction is for that, missing pedestrian connection. One of the goals was improve pedestrian access and safety on our cheerleader streets. Once again, the plan will look at some general recommendations for that, but as far as, specifically what would go on a particular street, that'll be up to the city staff to come up with the final design or recommendation on that. Our recommendation was to share the plan with the Park District, and I can tell you that it is planned to share the master plan and the review process with the Park District. One of the recommendations was make pedestrian travel safe and interesting. Regional Planning Commission will provide some general recommendations, but once again, the city staff are responsible for specific design and implementation of any improvements to accomplish those 2 items. There was a comment that you make sure to provide BPAC members with sufficient review time. I don't think there's any issue with us providing at least 2 weeks of review time in advance of any discussions concerning any of the documents. If you think you need more, we can have discussions and see if we'd be able to provide you with more time. But we had talked about 2 weeks as what we thought might be sufficient for review time. And then finally, there was a question about the cost with the existing data collection analysis. Just wanted to verify that the existing sidewalk inventory study, was being utilized, that they weren't having to kind of redo any effort on that. And I did verify that. In fact, they only have 40 hours budgeted for data collection out of the 162 hours in that particular existing condition. So they're not spending a huge amount of time that would be required to go out and do any kind of resurvey of the existing sidewalk inventory. So they will be obviously reutilizing that previous study that they had done. So with that, are there any questions or comments on specific items there, or any additional ones you may have thought over or thought of in the last 2 months that you'd like considered or addressed?
Well, I have a question. If you would go back, I think, one slide.
Gonna go back a couple slides.
Yeah, one more. So when it says that the plan will provide general recommendations, but city staff will be responsible for specific improvements. The first part is talking about recommendations, and the second part is talking about improvements. So I find that a little confusing. Are we talking about the city staff providing specific recommendations, or what? I'm not sure what that means.
This is for the benefits of the plans, or the
Well,
pedestrian
it was
connections?
more than once, and at the bottom item there, you had that same thing in some of the previous questions, like under pedestrian access.
Mhm.
And it would say the plan will provide general recommendations, and then it would say staff will be responsible for specific improvements. And I don't understand the shift from recommendations to improvements in the clarification of that.
Oh, I apologize for any confusion on that. I think the kind of the general principle in all those, that the Regional Planning Commission will provide some kind of general policy guidelines that would be up to the city staff to work out the specifics,
Okay.
whether it's a policy or a, improvement when it comes to
Okay.
connectivity.
All right, gotcha.
Any other?
Anybody else have questions or comments? Everybody's thrilled?
Yeah, my comment would be nice work. This really addresses a lot of the concerns that I had when it was first presented, so looking forward to seeing see it kind of go into action.
Okay, thanks.
Great, yes. Thanks for bringing back clarification and follow-up. We appreciate that.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of jump ahead to the next steps. The slides that I went through were the ones that you had actually seen last time on the
Okay.
scope of services and budget and schedule. So, and there's been no changes to that. But kind of the next steps would be we'll finalize the scope of services, which is why we were looking for some final input from you tonight regarding that. The next step after that will be we'll execute an agreement with the Regional Planning Commission to do the master plan study, and then we'll kind of kick off that pre-planning phase, which will get the website up and running. We'll have the kickoff meeting on it. So I would anticipate we'll get started shortly after the first of the year, and as soon as we start pulling together some documentation, we'll be able to integrate you guys in the process. And I will, either through Craig or myself, give you guys regular status updates as we move along, so that you guys are aware of where we are in the process at all times.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have Lily, who is going to talk about the Armory Avenue Bike Path Extension. And if you have not used the Armory Bike Path, you may not know how important that is.
Yeah, I have some pictures. Don't worry. Whoa. There's a lot of stuff in here. Sorry, wait 1 second. Oh, here we go. All right. So this is something that we're really excited to get started on the work of. So right here is a picture of the site that we're talking about. When I say Armory Avenue, that's a road that it stops in Champaign. So this sounds kind of confusing why we call it that, but it kind of starts there in the University District. So we call it this extension. It goes from there all the way to Lincoln Avenue in Iowa. And so this is a bike path you may or may not be familiar with, but it's over by Lincoln and Iowa, and it will go straight all the way here, kind of dead end to where it doesn't really continue, and there's no curb or anything like that cut to get into Lincoln Avenue. So for a lot of cyclists, they'll have to make a 90-degree turn, either north or south, to get to a place where it's safe to cross Lincoln Avenue. The path is in pretty terrible condition. These are just some of my favorites, but actually the whole section that is under construction here, this part right here, that whole path needs to be demoed and completely replaced. Instead of completely demoing it and replacing it with the concrete and just accepting that cyclists are going to have to make a 90-degree turn and find some way to get across Lincoln, we'd like to take cyclists and pedestrians, because pedestrians already have a nice walkway to go there, and then a mulch path to get to the intersection as they have desired to do so. We would like to include cyclists in that and actually make the path for pedestrian and cyclists to get to Iowa Street, where a lot of people are coming from to get to that path, and where a lot of people from the quad or from the Armory side are traveling to get into Urbana. So Iowa Street also will take you to Broadway, it will take you to the high school, it will take you to Carl Park. There's a lot of very nearby attractions on Iowa too as well for cyclists. So these are the existing conditions. You probably recognize that these conditions have been around and been like this for a very long time, if you're familiar with this path. But if you can see this dirt right here on the side, the energy distribution folks put in brand new lamp posts along here, and as beautiful and LED and awesome as they are, it unfortunately really made this bad situation worse. So we are taking a look at replacing this using a student-initiated bike infrastructure fee. So here's some things, the criteria that we use when we have in the campus bike plan to really kind of what this path is, why we want to change it. It's segregated from the roadway. Bicyclists are not able to operate as vehicles at many intersections. The bike path is poorly marked. I'll get a little bit into that, but we're also going to change some of the striping besides just replacing that concrete and reworking how cyclists are going to use it. We're also going to, there's some poorly striped segments a little bit farther up, and I'll talk about that too as well, closer to the quad. The path is of substandard width. It is not our typical width for multi-lane two-way paths. It's partially blocked with potential hazardous obstructions. I showed you some of those potholes, but there are other obstructions too as well. I don't have very many photos of that because I didn't want to just show you like, this is my trip down Armory Avenue. But there's also a steam vent that conflicts with it too, just a little ways down. I don't think that steam vent is actually in use anymore too as well, so it's just kind of this awesome concrete thing. And it's got insufficient geometric design at the location, which makes turning very precarious. Many people will complain last winter and the winter before, where it was also very, very snowy and icy, of slipping and falling when they have to make that 90-degree turn on the ice. So something that if we made the turning radius much wider, or if we just change the path as it was, it would make it a lot safer, a lot less people would slip and fall. So we really wanted to change this up a lot. So here's one of the things that we wanted to do. This is really hard to read, so I'm going to walk it through it a little bit. Right here, this green segment right here is actually striped right now for being a sidewalk. There's no striping, and then right here, it actually is where we've wanted bicycles to be in the past, and we have our awesome little yellow lines down the side. We would very much not like to have this crisscross of traffic, so what we did is we're going to be changing that. We're going to be scarifying the side that has that, and we're going to be switching it up and making sure that the other side has looks more like it's supposed to be for bicycles. On campus, we do have a rule. It's really much more of a guidance, but we do have a rule that says bicycle paths are for bicycles and not pedestrians. We all know that there's a lot of folks from all sorts of parts of the world, and it's a learning experience for everybody. But do want to make it as easy as possible to understand that crisscrossing of traffic is a really, really big conflict zone that may not be necessary. So we're gonna switch that up a little bit. When we go down a little bit further, here's where we kind of see the biggest amount of construction. This is where we're going to rip all of this part out. Oh, wait. We're going to rip all this part out. And we're going to be adding a 10-foot wide path, multi-use path, is what we would recommend for this area. We're going to be avoiding this tree and not making a straight path, but we're going to instead go around the tree to protect it. It's really lovely sycamores that go all the way down to like PAR, to this stop line right here for bicycles. Pedestrians will be able to walk to the crosswalk. You can also walk your bicycle through the crosswalk. We've recommended to the city of Urbana for switching out the signs right here. And I think Urbana is interested in switching out these signs. Instead of just pedestrian, it'll be pedestrian bike. In the future, we'd like to explore some way to kind of warn car drivers on the intersection, but Urbana would like to explore that and research that further first.
At that stop sign, is there a gradiated? Yeah, there's a curb cut. Like I know for sure there's a curb cut near that stop sign. There's already a wide curb cut.
So there's a stop sign right here, and we'd be adding a stop sign right about here to warn there, and there'll be a stop line. There is a curb cut.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
For service vehicles, and I think it was an old driveway a long time ago.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm very concerned with, and transportation demand management is pretty concerned with cyclists just not stopping on the stop line. Yeah. And
that is
going
a very
right here and not.
This is super dangerous.
And cars being like, "Whoa! I only thought of this crosswalk because this is striped." But this is something that needs to be explored a little bit further. The first thing that we'd like to do is not make the situation worse, and instead we'd like to make it better. So we'd like to look at it a little bit further first. It's a very, very solid point. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just going to say because traffic does not see that it's a pedestrian walk space or a bike crossing space. Car traffic does not see that at all. And I drive down that street and I don't even see, I'm like, do, so I understand why cars don't see it. But I just, to more quickly get across that street, I do use that curb cut. So it's useful to me, but
certainly. Yeah. And if you go out, if you went out, if the snow had melted a little bit and you went out, you'd see frozen tire tracks right where that curb cut, service vehicles use it all the time. When they're doing grounds work. We're going to have that curb cut still there. The biggest concern is to predict that there might be some bicycle traffic who are going to want to use that curb cut too as well, and make sure that cars can see the cyclist before any situation happens. So
cyclists are already using that.
Yes.
Yeah. And so you're actually only just supporting the behavior that's already happening.
Yeah.
And I would like, this is my path.
Well, that's why we want to take it to the intersection.
Right.
Yeah, I really like this. This is really, really smart because that just drives me crazy to have to ride my bike and like weave through pedestrians or take that right-hand turn. And you'd have to be able to see a pedestrian coming down the sidewalk on your left or your right. And it was just really, you hate it. You felt terrible, and this is really nice. Yeah, and I also like, as a pedestrian, walking through that mulched area. I love that. And under
Yeah.
those trees, and I love that this is a little curve and not just some whoop, straight line. It's much more interesting with that little curve in there. So this is great.
That's great to hear. We would like to, with this new fee that students have voted to spend $1 on bicycle infrastructure every year, we'd like to also just keep going down to the Armory Avenue path, because that path is rife with problems. And this segment was not only really bad, but we also, when it was designed, it was not designed knowing that there was going to be as much businesses around Gregory Place and those areas. So there's more pedestrian and bicycle conflict there than we've ever seen before those businesses went in place. And we have a lot of people there who are not just going to their dorm room or going to, say, the music building or Matthews Avenue. There's also a lot more traffic trying to get, meet someone for lunch. So we would like to improve some of these conflict zones.
Lily, do you have traffic counts for various bike paths on campus?
Absolutely not. Nope.
Oh, so you don't have
Jeff,
those?
if you want to go out there with a clipboard and with me, I'll consider it.
Okay.
Maybe in better
Some
weather.
Saturday.
Yeah,
peak
absolutely. What we do have is the amazing and awesome volunteer efforts that people in this community have stood up and done for counting parked bicycles with the bike census. We have zero information on bicycle traffic, car traffic, and pedestrian traffic counts.
I would volunteer to sit at Lincoln at that area and count pedestrians, bikes, cars, everything. I would totally volunteer
That's
to
awesome.
do it. I mean,
Craig has counted at that intersection.
I mean,
and
I have video already, so I already have the number of pedestrians and bicyclists and cars for a 12-hour count. So you can go ahead and do it.
I will not volunteer my time anymore.
Yeah. I mean, we appreciate you.
But
We've got other intersections we want to count, though.
But
You wanna go?
what Jeff was saying, campus specific, like bike paths, there's nothing that exists. Craig's amazing and he has equipment for that. We don't have that.
I guess also on Bike to Work Day, if I recall, wasn't there one of the stations on this path?
It
Or
was
maybe
kind
a
of
couple-
close to that path. Every year there is a station. Most years there's a station right down here where my mouse is,
Okay.
which connects to it. See, one of these, it's this one right here because there's more potholes, you can tell. This one right here connects to Cersei, which is Campus Rec, and Campus Recreation has been really, really great about always hosting a Bike to Work Month station. I think that they were more in tune with Bike to Work Month than before Transportation Demand Management was supporting Bike to Work Month. So very, very awesome pro-biking people. And so, yeah, people would come through here or they would take a path down Dorner Avenue, say if they'd usually take Pennsylvania, which is a very heavily used bicycle route. So... Anyways, this is my really cool project. I just wanted to show you guys.
Thank you for doing that. One thing I will say is that there are online materials for doing counts that you can use as part of the National Bike Count and training and forms. And
Yeah.
so you could organize such an event. And we did that a couple of years in a row, quite some time ago. We did a few, and so it's a perfectly viable way of collecting some data.
Absolutely. I think most universities still use volunteers with clipboards to count bicycles.
Yeah.
And I guess the reason I asked the question is because it'd be interesting to see the metrics before and after this path is.
Yeah. We should definitely anticipate a higher bicycle traffic usage. I personally know a lot of people who don't take that intersection because they don't really like it. And they go down to, say, Illinois or they go to Pennsylvania. So this would be very interesting, too, as well, Jeff. Yeah. And maybe, Craig, if you had the chance after the project's done to redo a count, that would be awesome.
Yeah, with our, just so the commission knows, city staff, we've collected 12-hour counts from every intersection from Pennsylvania to Nevada this last fall. And our plan is to undertake a corridor study and look at the particularly Iowa and Ohio intersections. We've had some complaints at Nevada. We've also had some at Pennsylvania. But Iowa and Ohio are the ones that have received the most complaints, particularly pedestrian-oriented complaints, safety issues. There's some concerns about the level of lighting. So that's our plan. So like what Lily's done is great. You know, it brings the Armory path up, and then we'll look at it further as far as the crossings. For those of you that don't know, it was about 10, 11 years ago that we did a road diet through that section, and which then I think helped. But now, you know, with those come other issues that we've got to try to address. So the idea would be to have some type of analysis performed with recommended treatments, you know, at the various locations.
Yeah, I think in terms of motorist compliance with yielding to pedestrians, I see really good compliance on Green, where we put in the stop for pedestrian signs. On Lincoln, I rarely see compliance, and it may be partly design and signing, I don't know, but there's just not good compliance at all, and I find it often very frightening. And at night, I do have trouble seeing people. So I think, you know, we did this a long time ago now, and we've come a long way in our design and standards for facilities since then. So it's good to take a look at that and see how we can upgrade it. Does anybody else have any questions? So we have a question from the audience.
Oh, yeah.
That's just some information for
Oh, cool.
you. The curb cut at Iowa was put in as part of the curb cut across was put in for bicyclists coming off of Iowa and coming back on. Because there used to be down where the bike path came out on, it used to just drop right onto Lincoln.
Yeah.
And it was moved to Iowa as part of the bike lane, or the multi-use lane that was, the multi-use path that was put in on the west side of Lincoln.
When we
That was
did the
part of
road diet?
That was part of the road
Okay,
diet. So
okay.
the curb cut was moved at that time. So what you really want to do is put a stop sign
Yeah.
right there for bikes coming,
Mm-hmm.
going eastbound. So
Yeah, I
not just
think
in
that's
the
a good
back part,
idea.
but right there on the,
Yeah.
right there on the curb. And that would be a city, I think, put in. Is that a city path at this point?
The
Multi-use
path, well, you mean up and down Lincoln?
Yeah, I don't know whether the city or the campus would put in that stop sign. I don't know whose
I think
jurisdiction that is.
The campus would have the stop sign on the path, but the, you know, the warning signs on Lincoln.
Yeah, but
would
a
work
stop
something out.
sign for bicycles going eastbound,
Eastbound, that would probably be campus.
the campus. That'd be you guys too,
And
yeah.
we were planning on doing that.
Okay, right there at the curb, yeah, that's right. But it was, I think there's another curb cut either at Ohio or further up, isn't it?
I can't recall.
Further south?
To explain that just a little bit further, what we're planning on doing is, we're planning, so we're worried about the stop sign and visibility, because obviously if we have the stop line here, some folks are they're gonna get it, especially after maybe the third or fourth use of this path. But if they just come straight to where they've always gone in the past, they may not see a stop sign if it's too far in or too far
Yeah,
out. So
no,
we're
where
actually-
it's needed is right here at the curb cut,
Yeah.
right at the opening of the curb cut, because that's where it will be most effective.
It's one of the locations we're clearing.
Yeah.
When we do the corridor study, I think that's the opportunity to take a look at whether you want to actually have a separate crossing for bicyclists for a variety of reasons. So I think that opportunity is still there further down the road.
Yeah, I mean, within that corridor, Iowa and Pennsylvania are the main entry points
Yeah.
to the Urbana system.
Yeah.
Is there a discussion of, when you look at the corridors, I'm jumping, I know, but will there be bike lanes on Lincoln Avenue?
No, I don't think we'll go to that level, because that would have been an analysis that would have come out of the bike master planning process. But what we're talking about is our crossing treatments. Now, one thing that we could consider is, we do have volume counts for the traffic, and we have speed. I've got speed numbers too. So then we'll be able to analyze that and see whether or not there's any traction for potentially lowering the speed limit through that corridor, which then would help, I think, also for pedestrians and bicyclists through there.
Because I know there's that one of the reasons I don't use the stoplights up on the corner, I think it's Nevada and Lincoln, where there's is it a Aroma Cafe and Jimmy John's? Am I at the right? Is that Nevada Lincoln? No,
Paradiso.
Cafe Paradiso.
Yeah,
What's that
because
street?
then you have to ride either on the sidewalk or in the street.
Right. Yeah. So basically,
Make a
where
left
there's
turn.
Cafe Paradiso, there's
Yeah.
that stoplight infrastructure. I mean, I just stand there and laugh with people when I just say, well, no, because the pedestrians and the cyclists just don't wait for the lights. The lights are ill-timed for them. The cars, it's like just sort of, it seems like if we slowed traffic down, maybe we could just everyone could just slowly, safely move about. I know I'm heading in the roundabout area, but it just seems like, because I can't ride my bike down Lincoln. I can't, the only way I can get over to those areas is the Iowa. I mean, it really is the reason why I use that. It's because it's the only entryway in. And I hate standing, I hate the beg button. It says, wait, and it just cracks me up because I'm like the only person who waits for the lights. Everybody else just kind of goes.
And those are good points, and I think one of the things that we're going to investigate too, and a lot of it will be the metrics on use. Well, it could drive maybe a ped scramble there, but we would have to see how much, I mean, right now we have one at Goodwin and Green, but we have a tremendous amount of pedestrians and bicyclists at that intersection. Same thing at Wright and Green.
Yep.
But I think we get your point about Nevada and Illinois, so that's something that we want to look at there too.
It's like scary if you get stuck, even if you're like where the spur lock is. If you're trying to cross over, you're like stuck in the middle of that. You're just kind of stuck there, and you're like, I'm gonna get hit. It's absolutely frightening. So that's what you're not going to attract. You're not going to, basically with the current infrastructure, you're not going to attract pedestrian and cyclists. Simply put.
Right. So with the corridor study, it's mainly looking at the crossings, but we're also not going to try to reinvent the wheel. I mean, we don't want to have to spend a tremendous amount of money here to redo things. We just want to improve what we have, because we have other areas that we want to look at, like north and south of Bradley Avenue on Lincoln. There's some real serious problems up there with, we have apartment building use with bus pull-offs, and we have students walking across the road there, and visibility is an issue there too, and that's another study that we're going to look at next year too. So.
And I would like to add, these are really good problems to have, that we're attracting more cyclists and more pedestrians and more mode shift. These are like really good problems to have. It means that we are slowly implementing the previous plan, and we will continue to implement the new plan, and this is good.
Thanks, Lily. Everyone's very excited about that opportunity. So last month, Annie did a presentation on wayfinding from a user perspective, which was very interesting, and she brought back samples from Indianapolis. And as many of you know, I work part-time with a national firm called Alta Planning and Design, and one of the areas of specialization they have is wayfinding, which I've had an opportunity to work on. This last year, we're wrapping up a wayfinding plan in Peoria, Illinois. And so I asked the experts, which I'm not part of the actual expert group within that firm, for information to share with you all on, because there's a whole system and protocol for wayfinding, and I thought I would share this information with you all tonight. So this is mostly somebody else's work, I should hasten to add, that I've adapted to show to you tonight. So wayfinding is, as Annie said, and we all talked about, is more than just putting up signs. It's really about helping people get where they want to go, and assisting them and comfortably and intuitively getting there. And I'm going to talk about some of the other benefits along the way too. And you'll see examples of wayfinding systems that have are included here. Different communities have developed. So a lot of benefits to wayfinding. They are an extension of our community's effort to encourage more walking and biking. It's definitely a part of an encouragement program to give people that information. And if you build it, they will come. If you tell them how to get there, they will come in droves. And so that really makes a big difference to people. There was a survey done in London, and they said people who they surveyed said that having the wayfinding system did encourage them to walk more often and to explore further because they have more confidence about where they're going and what they'll find when they get there. There's also economic benefits from it. It can be an economic development tool, and we are all very excited about the Kickapoo Trail that has the potential to bring in bicyclists, but also people will use it for walking and running. And so it creates a more legible network, and it gives people a positive travel experience. So it can create tourism and recreation and business investment along the way. And there's community pride in branding the system to highlight your community, and it gives people a sense of place, and that's one of the things you hope that you can accomplish with it. And so these are basic principles. You gotta love that photo. Maybe it was a bus stop or their pose. I'm not sure which. But so, the primary function is to help connect people to places. That's your first goal in doing this. But it's also to help visitors and people who live there, so it's not one group, it's several groups. And it needs to be predictable both in terms of the information provided and the placement, and that it's easily recognizable and understood, and that was something that Annie talked about in her presentation. And it needs to be legible to the widest range of users possible. And so in places where you have other languages, that's something to keep in mind. People who speak other languages, that's something to keep in mind. It should also be simple. You don't want something so complicated that people are trying to figure out what it really says, that they can easily get the information they need pretty quickly, and that you make sure that the primary users are the focus of the system. So there are sort of three different signs that you want to take a look at, particularly for bicycles. And so for bicyclists, we're going a little faster than pedestrians, so you want to have decision signs at intersections where people have to make a decision about which direction to go. So they need to know, do I turn right, do I turn left, do I go straight? And to clarify that, confirmation signs are often placed after an intersection, particularly if it's a complicated intersection, so that you know that you went the right direction. And when I've been in, I always try to get out on my bike by myself in a community I'm visiting to see if I can find my way around. And I know I need confirmation that I may turn the right way and that I'm still going the right direction. And if I don't get confirmation after a really long period of time, I get very anxious. And I wonder if I should turn around and go back or turn. And I'm a professional, so people who don't do this for a living must undoubtedly be even more anxious. So you want to confirm for people. And then turn signs should be used at complex intersections in particular, so that people know you're supposed to turn to go to this destination. So,
can I ask you about the height on that previous slide?
Yep, well, we're going to talk about the height.
Okay, got it.
Yep, we are. There are rules about that. So, so there are a lot of elements that you can include. There are identity signs and kiosk and interpreted signs, and most of those are really intended to be viewed from the pedestrian perspective, because you have to stop and get up to them to really read them. And the MUTCD doesn't really address pedestrian wayfinding. So in some cases, we'll have wayfinding, like, for example, along the trail, that'll be for both sets of users. But when we're putting wayfinding on a bicycle-specific piece of infrastructure, that's going to be a different kind of a design than for pedestrians. So there are requirements. The ADA, Americans for Disabilities Act, has standards for heights and clearances that have to be maintained, and that's something that we have to take into account. Then there are pavement markings as tools, and I should point out that the second one shown here is not in the MUTCD. It's something the community has put in themselves. And one of the things we have to think about in using them is that in the winter they can get covered by snow, and in some locations, like on off-road, they could get covered by leaves. So there are maintenance issues for us to consider, and that these are just examples of other places and different kinds of markings that they have used. Oh, and as you saw there, it goes from, on the left is the standard, which is in the MUTCD, over to the right, where a community has taken that and adapted it and branded it for a route that they have. And this one is in St. Louis, where they've done a system. So on trails, you sometimes will want to include wayfinding without putting signs in to add to clutter for a variety of reasons. If you have a paved surface, of course, you have to think about how long you want it to last. There's always maintenance issues. Do you use thermoplastic, which is more expensive? And the other thing that's interesting about all of this is that if a trail is considered part of your transportation system, it is covered, even though it's off-road, by the MUTCD. If it is not considered part of a transportation system, then it is not. And one of the ways in which that differentiation is made is paving. If it's not paved, it's usually not considered part of your transportation system. One can argue with those interpretations, but that is how it's generally interpreted. Also, you can see the various ways communities have provided branding along routes so that people know they're on a route. So they can be identifiers that you can include that don't say anything, but you know you're still on the route. And one of the things I should say too is that by not adding additional signs, by using what's already there, you cut down on sign clutter, which becomes a real problem. The other thing is mile markers, particularly on trails. These are popular, and they serve as a way for people to measure distance. And one thing that I had not thought about, but which actually could be rather important, is that on a trail, they also can be used as a way to identify where you are for emergency response. When you're in town, you're on a road, or even out on a country road, you may be able to see a mailbox or something that you can identify where you are, but when you're on a trail, you really might not have a very good idea. And so having the mile markers can help with that. Then there are the orientation maps, and we've all seen these, and I like them. When I go places, they have the dot that says, "You are here," and it can tell you walking times and biking times. It can give you all kinds of information that's helpful for you finding where you want to go and whether or not you think you have the time to get there. Another thing is selection of materials, and I saw a very interesting presentation at the state APA conference by a firm doing a plan in Atlanta. They're doing an entire ring bike path system. It's a multi-use trail, but mostly I think it'll be bicyclists using it for transportation. And one of the things that they wanted was to have the system be as low maintenance as possible. And they've done some very creative things with materials that were not going to require very much maintenance. So as we think about materials for this, of course, there's initial costs for materials. Some materials are much more expensive, and then there's long-term maintenance, and then there's community identity. And some places, for example, really have an objection to using harder surfaces like metals. They want woods, but of course woods are not as durable. They're a bit better than fake woods. Blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on. There's a lot of directions you can go, and a lot of community preferences. And so what you want to try and put together really is a cohesive family of signs for your community. What kind of signs do we want? And create a complete wayfinding package. So one of the things that we have done is a visual identity analysis with people, and sometimes you can do it with the community, but you can also do it with stakeholders. Many places will use colors in the city logo or major community identifiers as a way to do that. So you want to engage the community in how do you want to identify yourself, and creating that package of visual identity. Some of you have looked at the manual on uniform traffic control devices. And is anyone here, I've never looked at this. I think perhaps everyone in this group may have at some point looked at this. Great nighttime reading for going to sleep. This manual is a mere 800 and some odd pages long, but only about 26 or so of those pages, 27, here it is. The MUTCD is 862 pages long, but 27 pages cover bike facilities. And this is what they have in terms of their guidance, and it's all been done in the name of consistency, which is what the entire guide is about. As they began building roadways across the country, because this goes all the way back to the 1930s, they didn't want it to be confusing going from one place to the other, so they tried to develop some consistency. So here we go. I already talked about this a little bit. Does it pertain to my trail project? If it's a natural surface, no. If it's a paved surface, yes. So there we are. The Kickapoo Trail will not be considered to be under the guidance, because most of it will be you call it limestone, and so but nevertheless, we have a greenways and trails plan in the county that we've already laid out some design principles that we were trying to provide, so that we have some consistency across the county for our wayfinding systems. And I don't have that in here, by the way. I'm sure that as we move forward, the people who are developing our plan will go through that information with us and what's already out there. There is some ability for flexibility for the MUTCD, and so that amount of flexibility and how that's interpreted varies from one community to the next. So, for example, some of these states, you can see what they did is they've sort of put a logo in, they've added information onto it. And this is sort of a continuum. This is fitting exactly within their guidelines down to doing something much more outside of that. And you can see that there's a difference in cost as you do that. So one of the things that was included in this presentation, this is not my personal experience, but it is of the consultants within the firm, is a cautionary tale. They did a off-road plan in Portland, and a consultant was hired, and they developed a set of wayfinding guidelines, and then they did a set of pilot studies. They had funding granted from their State Department of Transportation. However, when their DOT saw the designs, they said they would not fund them because they're not in compliance with the MUTCD. So then they had to come up with local funding to install the system. So the caution in this tale is to always make sure that if there is any involvement with state DOTs, that you make sure that they are involved in the process and engaged in the selection as you go along, so that you don't have a surprise at the end, and that everybody is on board with what you have chosen to do before you start proceeding too far down the road. So I think perhaps here we are more aware of and practice this more than other places because of our amazingly fragmented governmental structure. We have to do a lot of upfront engagement and coalition building and agreement. And so you rarely have a plan that has not involved multiple entities and a lot of engagement. And so we rarely get to the end of a process and have it blown out of the water like this, because we're used to having intergovernmental discussions about all of these things, and that's just part of how we do business here. So I think that's less of a problem for us than other communities, because it's sort of standard practice for here. But in any case, they got, as you can see, rather creative with their signage, and their DOT didn't think that it was appropriate. However, there are memos from the Federal Highway Administration outlining the ability to use flexibility, but still there is going to be interpretation from one state DOT to the next. So here are some of the standards. There's a standard color and there's standard icons. And the other thing is how the destinations are shown. Typically they'll have 3 on there and put them in a rectangular shape. And the way in which they are put on there is also designated that they tend to have the straight ahead location at the top, followed by the destination to the left, and then the destination to the right. This is part of that developing consistency in how they are put together. Here you've got a little bit of custom design in the shape and the logo. It's sort of taken that standard design and expanded a little bit, included destination in minutes. The time to get there by bike is calculated at 10 miles per hour, and I think that's fairly common for if you average everybody out for bicycling. And the rule is that logos or enhancement markers may be added as long as they don't take up more than 20% of the sign area. So they can't dominate the sign. So there are some colors you cannot use. You cannot use red because, as you see, that's for regulatory signs, warning signs. Green is our guidance signs. The yellow-orange is temporary traffic control. Regular yellow is also a warning. The blue signs, as you will perhaps have noted when you're on trips across country, are informational. And the brown are recreation and cultural. So you're not allowed to use those colors per se as your, especially the warning signs. They don't want you using them as your color scheme. So there are a lot of destinations that you may want to include, and so you'll see here they've got the straight ahead one first, and they've got the distance and the miles, which I think sometimes can be helpful for people. But you need to have a consistent approach however you decide to do it. And so the placement prioritization generally is, to have bigger destinations like cities first, and then as your first priority, and then local destinations being, the lower priority. Of course, these are regional typically, and these are local, so there's overlap there. And also, in terms of the distance, because typically when you're signing a city, it's going to be farther away than a local destination. And local destinations, what you want to do, for example, is give it as a district as a destination. You don't put on your signs McDonald's, 0.5 miles ahead. What you would put is something like, commercial district or arts district or something along those lines, so that people know there are those kinds of amenities there. But you don't want to put specific businesses in, because businesses change. And so then you have to change your signs. And that gets very expensive. Plus, it's using public resources for private benefits. So there are a variety of reasons for not doing it that way. So here you see the kinds of things they're talking about for the different levels. And we've got several of these things. And we've got a university district and 2 city centers and historic neighborhoods. We've got a major university. We've got a variety of things that people are traveling to. Then it shows sorts of landmarks. You could have entertainment districts, libraries, lots of public facilities you can include, parks, civic buildings. An interesting route for us would be to have a Lincoln route for bicycling. We've got the signs, so perhaps we could set up a route. It's something I've thought about doing. I think it would be fun. So then in terms of placement, you can see what they show here is where you would put a turn sign, where you would put your confirmation signs and your decision signs, so that people can get where they need to go and that it's got a consistent approach. So this just shows you how you can put together a system. And once again, just talking about the sign placement, we've already talked about that a bit. And different ways that you can do that using basically sort of the MUTCD layout. And so then the question will be for us, what message do we want to convey about our community? How do we want to present ourselves? Different communities do different sorts of things. And what are the colors, the words, the themes? Those are all, there's modern, sophisticated, all kinds of ways in which communities want to identify themselves. And we went through this process to a large degree with the wayfinding plan that the city did, but I think it was more focused on the downtown area, and it didn't really expand to the community. But all of that is part of what we want to take a look at as we're doing this, because we've already got a lot of signs out there. So how do we build this system so that it syncs with what we've already got in place and builds on that and complements it? So it shows you here signs, the kinds you've already got in your community, and how do we want to enhance that and build on it. This is, a design process going through with people. Where are you going? How do you want to get there? It can be as simple as that. Our community tends to have a little more sophisticated approach to identifying the routes that we want to use. So what are our priorities? We'll go through that. Our priorities, proximity, gap closure, et cetera. We'll be talking about all of that as we go through our wayfinding process. And then another interesting thought is demonstration projects. And so could we say, look at some routes and put in stencils using spray-on chalk to see how does this work? We do it for when we have, bike events like See You Across the Prairie. So is that something that we would like to do as a demonstration to the community? Some places, in fact, do things like pop-up bike lanes and cycle tracks, et cetera, to try it out using temporary materials that are fairly inexpensive. In St. Louis, one of our former students here, Grace Kyung, did this, and they did things like they used spray-painted old tires and flowers and pots and a variety of things to demonstrate different infrastructure in different city council wards, and a number of those are now actually being made permanent based on the community response to them. So then this was the question you asked about height, and there are some specifics involved in that as to how high it should be, and it depends on what kind of sign you have. Those are all things that we'll be discussing during the planning process. You do want to have the sign be readable by a bicyclist as they're going by. It can't have a font so small that you have to stop and get off your bike to go and read it. So, there's some basics like that. There's some examples of communities and how they have implemented this. These are just examples of how places have done it. You can see the wide variety of how communities brand themselves in terms of the design that they choose and the kinds of signs that they choose, and the kinds of materials and colors that they choose. It varies a lot, and so there's a lot of opportunities. And in terms of expense, and that's something that we really have to keep in mind during this process, is because if we want to have a complete system, how do we pay for it? And so that's a discussion that we'll have to have. And you can see how different communities have done this. So this is just a recap of what we talked about. You can see what Jackson Hole did here. They used a fairly standard layout, but they did brand it. And so I will take any questions, and if I can answer them, since I don't claim to be a great expert on wayfinding, but I might be able to answer a few questions. The staff from Kuwat's, having done the Greenways and Trails plan, and based on past experience with them, they are always technically very well informed and provide us with really good information on what our best practices. But I thought I would share this with you so that it helps inform our conversation as we move forward.
I think you answered my height question, because if you're on like a snowmobile trail that's also a bike trail, the reason they can put the signs at a height at which a snowmobiler and a cyclist can actually read them is because it's not pavement. Maybe?
Yeah, off-road trails are different, and so it depends on the use of the trail and your primary audience. So that's the other decision point. And when you're looking at a location where you're using it for bicycling in the summer and maybe skiing and snowmobiling in the winter, you've got 3 different primary audiences that you're communicating with.
Because it's always confused me as a cyclist, like why the signs would be like the size for, like, if you have a stop sign, say it'll be like for the size of a car, versus like for like if you're over on like a snowmobile trail or a bike trail, they'll actually make it actually sized and at the height of where your eye is. Because like when I bike, I don't bike. Like when I drive my car, obviously I need things to be high up, but when I'm on my bike, I'm more here.
Well, and it's overkill to put a stop sign made for a vehicle on a bike path, so it'd be more expensive and unnecessary to have it that size.
I mean, I've seen like yield signs that no one even knows exists on bike paths. Like I can, but anyway, that's a whole other topic. But anyway, I was just more curious about
on the flip side of that, on the campus, we have experimented with much smaller signs for bike paths. So we have these little itty-bitty stop signs, these little toy-sized, and they're a little too short, and we get complaints about that, especially from our groundskeepers. And we also, they're so small that most students don't see them. They're just like, it doesn't, and which also might be, too, that we don't have too many signs. There's, like, a lot of other reasons why,
can you
but
are the
very small.
Just are the groundskeepers cycling is my first question.
No, their equipment will have interactions with the stop signs.
And then
that are too small. They're
hitting
too low. Yeah.
All right. And how big is small? How small is too small is more my question. My second question.
Yeah, I think
like Just
I'm going to guesstimate the one that we're replacing at the Armory Avenue bike path, but I would say it's maybe like 4.5 feet tall. It's
I
smaller.
think the size of in terms of the sign itself, the ones that we use in our bike rodeos are a good size for bicyclists. The ones in our bike rodeo are too short, I think, for implementation on a trail system, but the size isn't too far off. I think it's a good size. So the other thing is you don't want a stop sign to be in a location where it could be confused for a vehicular sign.
Oh,
That's another issue that can come up. And so you want to make sure that it's in a location that it cannot confuse drivers. So, but it sounds like on campus you want to make sure that they're high enough that it's easy enough for the guys clearing, because on campus they're clearing their pathways, and so they need to be able to get those vehicles down without having to worry about running over the sign. So placement is also an issue in terms of how close you have them to the trail. It has to be
Very
close
important.
enough that it's obvious, but not so close that it makes it hard for the equipment. And I guess, too, probably at a lot of those locations, they're doing a turn.
No, they're all straight throughs.
They're all straight through.
They're like
Okay.
mid-block crossings are the most
But
popular.
if you're at a T, I
And
would think
then-
that they would be turning maybe.
I can
or-
think of one at a T,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also like a pedestrian conflict. So you're crossing a sidewalk to get to a cycle track. There's a stop sign, and that's one where a lot of folks are never going to see it. It's just too
Yeah.
small
Yeah.
and in a weird place, and it's too small. Very
Cynthia,
interesting.
Yes.
Can you back up to your,
Oh.
the second to last slide, please?
Yes, sir. Let's see here. That one?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, the left sign there, I think that's what city staff had envisioned, something along that line
Mm-hmm.
with our wayfinding system where, with some research, what- right, something along that concept. Not literally that concept. We could show some flat land.
Yeah,
maybe.
we're in the
Some corn stalks.
flat. We're in the in the lowlands of Mount Level.
But we as well had done some research too, and you indicated 3 destinations, and that'll be a little bit challenging in certain areas.
You can
Because
add
we're-
more, right?
right.
Yeah, that's just recommended, but sometimes you can't just do
Yeah.
3.
Yeah, actually, it's actually, I think, a shall statement where they limit the 3, if I recall.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, with the MUTCD. That's another thing I want to point out is this manual uniform traffic control devices, within the city, anything within the right-of-way follows those guidelines.
Right.
So that
That's
is
correct.
that is. So when we get to some of these other type of signs, like Cynthia pointed out, we'll have to keep that in mind that with cost, because
Yep.
one of the things that we don't want to do is have such a costly system that we end up getting only a small portion of it
Exactly.
installed.
Yep.
One approach is you get, I wouldn't call it a vanilla or plain, but you get your system as implemented as quick as you can, and then maybe in the second go around, if it's very successful and you're able to secure other funding, you could replace and enhance and do those things.
Yeah. Well, as you can see from going through this, most of these only do have 3 destinations on them.
Right.
There were a couple that had more as I'm scrolling through here that were not on road signs, but more like was farther in here. Yeah, there's this one, for example. They had more than one. Yeah, and this one had 4.
That was a nice way to do 5.
But that's kind of, oops, I went the wrong
Do you
way.
think those were for pedestrians more than?
Well, I think it's a
perhaps,
kiosk, so it's not really on road. It's an off road, and so I would guess it would be on a multi-use trail.
Because
That's
one
a
of the
pathway.
things with what the manual talks about is, you don't want to place so much information that
Right.
bicyclists can't
Right.
comprehend, and make a decision, as they're going
Yeah.
through.
And this says Craig pedestrian directional.
Okay.
Yeah.
Back up one slide. Or another one. That one. So what I think is nice about the fourth one in small kiosk directional signage.
Mm-hmm.
What's nice about that is there's 2 arrows
Right.
and 5 destinations.
Yeah.
That's just one way
Yeah.
one way to think about it. So instead of having an arrow, I mean, I know there's standard signs, but it's just that's one way to think about it. It is I think that's a nice layout.
Well, we could, as part of our plan, have our basic system and then have additional signage that we would like to have, funding permitting, and if grant opportunities come along, we could enhance our system with these additional kiosks and things like that.
Yeah, I think that'd
And
be a
maybe
good idea.
partnerships with private entities that are interested in helping fund part of it, particularly with the Kickapoo Trail. I mean, right now, we're very focused on just getting the trail in, and that's where all of our resources are going to go. But once we've got that, then I think people are going to start saying, well, gosh, we'd like more of these other amenities, because I'm expecting it to be wildly popular. So,
one other thing we took note was that NACTO has some guidance within their design guidelines for bicycle wayfinding signage also. So we'll probably be following quite a bit of that.
yeah, that
as
would be
well.
good, because they're a little more creative in some of the ways in which they do it. But I agree, and there's a question of also of do we want our shop to be able to create the signs, or do we want to, there are all those other kinds of questions, and do we buy our street signs?
We have the capability to make, but I will tell you that we usually buy them on volume.
Because it's less.
Yeah. And
what I
and
was
then
thinking.
but we do most of our installation on our street projects in-house. Only because there's usually a markup when you hire outside, or it's included in a road project. There's a significant markup.
Yeah.
So that is one thing that we'll also look to see if we can cut the cost. The problem would be public works staff time to be able to implement a system. But we've already been talking about that a little bit in-house, because I think, we all just want to make this work. So we'll
Sure.
have to do what we've got to get it done.
Yeah, and the cautionary tale, one thing I didn't point out on that, by the way, the picture showed something very interesting there. For example, here, they had both the MUTCD signs and then the other branded signs, so then you get clutter. So you definitely do not want to end up with that sort of a problem, and I don't think that that's a problem that this community would have, but it was kind of an interesting aside as to what things that can go wrong. I think we've got strong enough consultants that would not happen here. But
Cynthia, at what point, or where is Peoria in the process?
we have selected the design and the materials and created a package for them that they are now going to be moving forward for review by the steering committee, and they have a fabulous off-road trail system. What they were really lacking was the on-road system, and they have a bike plan now that they're beginning to implement. So the plan that we did for them, it wasn't a large budget. It was a $30,000 budget, but what we did was set up a system for them that provided them with guidance on how to do it, not because some communities actually hire consultants to do a placement plan and tell them every place that they should put a sign and what kind of sign and all of that sort of stuff, and because they haven't even got the on-road system developed to the point that they want to put in a lot of wayfinding on roadway yet. They want to be able to do it as they put the infrastructure in, but they've got a fabulous trail, and they also wanted to create a system that could be used by other communities, not just Peoria, because the trail goes a long way. They've got a really nice trail system. So that's the point that they're at, and I think that was funded also with money from their MPO. So they've got their MPO operates a little bit differently than ours. Every MPO has its own processes and ways that they allocate funding. And I can't remember, Peoria, I think, is a bigger metropolitan area than us by quite a bit, isn't it?
I think so.
Yeah. I don't remember what the population of the metropolitan area is, but it's bigger than ours.
Would it be helpful for us to look at that or no?
Well, when it's public, I can certainly share it with you. It's very interesting going through and asking people what they like, because some people are very agreeable and like everything, and so how do you sort it out? And Midwesterners, I think, are maybe particularly prone in that direction. So it was fun watching that. I didn't put together that visual preference survey. Our experts did. But I got to watch how people responded to it. It was an interesting process. And our process will be I think, a little bit different, because I think we're probably not going to be quite as focused on the design part of it in terms of colors and materials, but I thought it would be interesting for us to know that's something a lot of communities do take a look at. But
I'll be focused on the design part.
Yeah, well, and I mean, it's a cost issue. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, is it's a cost issue. And so how do you want to do that, and how much do you want to spend? And I can't even answer those questions. I know the people in the firm who do this have done things. They go and tour some of the factories that manufacture signs, and so that they have a good handle on costs. And I can't answer those questions very well, but it is something that once they get theirs done, their plan done, then we could certainly ask to take a look at it and talk with their staff about how they arrived at the decisions that they did. But it's not they're not at that point yet in the process.
Yeah, in our research, really, I mean, it's in its infancy in Illinois. I mean, there's not a lot of places that have wayfinding or even are considering it, really. I contacted Ed Barsati with Ride Illinois, and there's a little bit up in Cook County, and there's not much. You know, and we were willing to drive within a day, you know, somewhere.
Indiana
long day
has
and check, and there's just not much out there.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a good chance for us to be leaders, kind of like we've always been. You know, with bicycling. I just want to say, excellent presentation. I think this is exactly the kind of framework that we're going to be looking at for our plan. Just to roll in with ours, you know, I think hopefully maybe January, February, I'll be coming forth with a scope to review in detail with you folks, and then we can get this process going. I am thinking about a steering committee pretty hard here, just because there's a lot of details that I think that we want to flush out in a hour or two long session with the steering committee, and then bring it to the BPAC commission for an overview and advice, not necessarily getting caught in the weeds. Because if we do that, one of my hold up is we're going to take a lot of your time periodically through the next year. And we have other things that we, I think, as a commission want to focus on too, and we can bring those and, you know, get your feedback, a lot like what the PED master plan is.
right.
But yeah, excellent job with this. I think that's
thanks.
exactly what we needed to see, and I like the culture trail too. I wish we had the money to do that, but there's some neat stuff there on that too that maybe we can, you know, get creative too and bring in.
We might have aspirational signage goals that, you know, if we could get there, we could do that. And, you know, pulling up the city's website, you can see we have created a city identity for ourselves. It's something that we'll want to think about as we contemplate how to do the wayfinding that helps you know that you're in Urbana. So, okay. Great. Well, I'll be happy to, when the plan in Peoria is approved, I'll be happy to share that. I know there are plans in Indiana has some, and Arkansas has a bunch. The Walton family has given large sums of money to trail development down there. They have really had a lot of activity, and so there's been a lot of trail building, a lot of wayfinding done for those systems. So there are places where this is happening that aren't necessarily communities with lots of money, but perhaps benefactors with a lot of money. And our main industry in the community is another public entity, so they are not providing large donations to the local community.
Surprise.
Yeah. Which is, we have a wonderful asset of having a fabulous center for, intellectual development and research that provides us with other benefits that a large industry does not, but those are all trade-offs in a community. All right, so our meeting for next month would be, what?
January 17th.
There you go. Oh,
Stairs.
that's the next item on our agenda. Let me go back to my seat. That's right. We can talk about meetings. Yeah, so that's the last item on here is our meeting dates. And so we've been provided with a schedule for meeting dates, and there was one date that we are changing. So we're not changing the date, we're changing the location. Okay. And so we would be meeting in the executive conference room, which is upstairs. So if the public wants to attend, what's the process for them accessing that?
They can just go right up to.
They'll be able to use the elevator to
Yeah.
come right up? Okay.
And then when they get up to the top, we'll make arrangements so that, because there is a door that you have to press a code. So we'll make sure that they can get up there. In the past, I think we held a meeting up there when Brandon was chair.
Okay.
We had one meeting up there.
Okay.
So, yeah, right.
Okay. All right, so then we've got January 17th is the next meeting, and then the meeting dates, they're posted on the website too, so people could put those on their calendar, and all of us should put it on our calendars. Does anyone have any questions? Do we have to approve it, or is that just a matter of information?
We could go ahead. I think we should go ahead and
All right,
do it.
let's have a motion for accepting
move to
our
approve.
meeting schedule.
I move to accept our meeting schedule with no amendments.
I second that.
Willie seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So I think that takes care of all of our new business. Announcements. Do we have any announcements?
The Lunar Cycle Ride will happen Tuesday, January 10th. It will be a 5-mile free ride. It will leave from the Common Ground Co-op, either the front, we'll be meeting in like the front porch area, or we're going to be meeting under like the bike rack, the covered bike rack. And everyone's welcome. If we did not do it in December,
Weather
Yeah.
permitting.
weather permitting, we will be doing this. Yes. I really wanted to do the December one. I really wanted to bike
We were going to
ride.
tour the bike lights on
The Candlestick
Lane lights, not the
Would've
bike
been
lights. Although
so
we were going to have
fun.
bike lights too.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's going to be super fun.
Well, I would like for us at some point to consider doing some winter rides that are advertised as polar rides. We would still need some weather limitations, but I think for the lunar cycle ride, we've been more cautious because of it being a short sort of introductory ride. We've got people coming who are not as familiar with riding, and so we don't want them out in bad weather conditions.
I was really just worried about like head, face, hands. Like I just didn't know if people would know how to what to wear properly. That was my biggest concern. So
Yeah, Indianapolis, they have a, I think they call it a polar bear ride. The mayor leads a polar bear ride in the middle of winter, and hundreds of people show up and go, and I think they use their trail. So I'd love for us to have kind of like our turkey trot, some sort of winter event, but we have not yet figured out how to organize such a thing. Yeah, and the turkey trot's your biggest event, right? Yeah, I got to go again this year for the first time, and you had the biggest turnout ever, right? You had 1,400.
And it's free, so many people show up, and then donations go towards our youth scholarships.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
And you get a ribbon if you're one of the first 800 people. So, yeah, I took pictures. There was a gentleman who had a cape on with all of his turkey trot ribbons attached to it. It's very entertaining. It's a great way to start Thanksgiving Day. Other announcements,
I have a couple.
please.
So, some good news. The city council yesterday passed the bicycle master plan.
Woohoo! Yay!
So, after many, many years of efforts, we now have a completed update, and I already have a list of goals from RPC that is 6
All right.
pages long that I'll be starting to attack with community development and police. There's a couple police goals in there too, but there was some talk about it not being aggressive enough, and then I was going through the goals again, and I was feeling a little bit overwhelmed. But we'll get there. And then the second announcement is another good news is all the agencies involved with the MCOR project have come up with the additional funding to award, recommend award of the MCOR project P1, which is in Urbana here from Wright, just east of Lincoln. And then also the projects 2 and 3 in Champaign. That was a big significant hurdle
Yes, it was.
to overcome. Thanks to the city councils for doing that. And so now the process would be basically a lot of prep work to get ready in the wintertime for start in the spring. And in Urbana, it'll be a multi-year construction. A lot of the first efforts will be around the Union area. There'll be a major work going on this summer within that zone.
Most people on campus are, I suppose, blissfully unaware that Green Street's going to be basically shut for 2 years. And despite all of our efforts to communicate with them, they are really not aware.
Many cyclists on campus are so blissfully excited about Green Street being shut down and being repaired.
Oh, no, I completely agree. But when I
get
talk to
comments
people
all the
on
time.
campus.
So how's MCOR?
And in fact, they don't even, I'll say, well, the MCOR project, and they'll go, what? So it's
Yeah.
difficult to get people's attention.
Certainly. But the University of Illinois wanted to say thank you, Urbana. We're super excited.
Yeah, well, thanks to the university too, and MTD, and then as well as
Pass
City of
that along.
Champaign. One thing
For
to
sure.
note, though, we do have a lot of provisions within the plans to keep access during construction.
Yeah.
So people will continue to be able to use. We'll have certain parts of it closed down, but we'll have crossings there for students. Primarily, though, once commencement happens in May, there will be a period of time until the classes start up that there will be a lot of aggressive work going on.
Yep.
Exciting work.
I think vehicular access is going to be the most impeded, if I understand how it works.
acrobats
Well, that
will
includes the
be-
transit, though, which is a huge method for moving the students around, so there will be frustration.
Yeah. So that was some good news. I will tell you, there were some trying times there for a while, but this is good.
Well, I just tell people when they get frustrated during the construction project, they should repeat, it'll be worth it in the end. So it'll be great when it's done. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I know there were very many worried people, including myself. I'm thrilled that we were able to overcome that hurdle and continue forward, because I think it's going to be a fabulous project when we get it done. And we did it in such a way that we're not going to lose the quality of the project that we had set out to do.
No, that's a good point. I mean, really, at one point, we were talking about having to significantly cut. And, that in the end would impact really what the essence of the project was about.
And there was
So-
concern about whether or not the federal government would think that we were still doing the project we originally got the money for. And so there was a risk of whether or not we would be able to keep the funding. So, it was a tough call, and people really did a lot of heavy lifting to get us over that hurdle. So, hooray. Any other announcements? Well, I want to tell everybody, have a great holiday. Go out and enjoy walking and biking as much as possible. Be careful on the ice. That has been difficult, and I also would like to encourage everyone to still think of going and signing up for the snow removal program. You can sign up for the sidewalk in front of your house. That is no problem. If it's something you're already clearing, we're happy to know that you're doing it. So please, you can go to cusaferetstoschool.com and sign up for the program there. And I have done that, and so have a few other people, and we need more people to help do it. So join the fun. Be a snow angel. All right. Thanks, everybody. So do we need to have a motion to adjourn?
Future topics?
Oh, sorry. How could I forget future topics? Future topics. Anybody have future topics they want to add in?
I want to bring up the thorny issue at some point. I'd like us to talk about ways for people that Craig doesn't have enough work, but just like feedback, like people that we could generally collect feedback and just generally get ideas. Whether
Public
that's,
engagement.
yeah, public engagement, whether it's like a Facebook
Okay.
page or I don't know what else, but just something. It would be nice. Just I read a comment on Facebook from a woman about something, and it was about Urbana. And it was just interesting to me. She's a very well-informed person, but she didn't go through, like the steps that we talked about that people can go through to give feedback. It was just an to me, I was like, bad user experience. So I just think that's something that if we could just talk about.
Okay.
So.
Any other future topics being requested? Okay. Now we're ready for a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Well, happy holidays and happy New Year, everybody.